Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. You may have heard about the sad ongoing decline of Scott Fitzgerald, Preston fighter, who was the former British super welterweight champ. He won the title in 2019 off Ted Cheeseman, and prior to that he had beaten Anthony Fowler, and I think at the time Fowler was undefeated. And Scott, I think, floored him in the final round, was it? That was his sort of coming out party. But since then, since that Fowler victory, he had the Cheeseman victory, got in the British title. Then he had his out of the ring issues with drink and drugs. And in 2021, he made it was meant to be the beginning of a comeback. He had an 8-round fight against a guy whose name I can't remember. I know he won in the 3rd round. And since then, nothing. His life spiraled continually out of control. And it's now resulted in him being given a 46-week sentence for GBH. Very, very sad decline, this. Fitzgerald is 31 now, so he's in the throes of addiction, quite clearly. And this is a subject, addiction, that is, that I know a little bit about, because I've spent the last 20 years on and off working for a drug and alcohol agency with people who are suffering from Class A substance misuse, alcohol abuse. I've worked in homeless hostels, supported housing. So I know a little bit about this type of mentality. And it was very interesting listening to Eddie Hearn talk about it, because Eddie said that he and Scott's manager, Steve Wood, devoted a lot of time in the past behind the scenes to trying to get Scott into rehab. I think Scott did go into rehab for a while. Eddie tried to help him, and he was saying, I was probably naive in that I thought that, I could help him, and in actual fact I couldn't. He needs specialist help. Well, the thing that I've learned over the years dealing with the Scott Fitzgeralds of the world is that you can offer as much help as you like, but it's not going to do a blind bit of good if the person in question doesn't want it, or if they're not ready to accept it. Because addiction is a very real thing. It's often called a disease, and I don't really like that, because that implies it can be caught. But there's no doubt that it exists as a sort of psychological mindset which is overwhelming. And addiction, when people think of addiction, they do think of Class A misuse, like heroin, crack use, or being an alcoholic, or In actual fact, you can be addicted to too many cream cakes. You can be addicted to gambling. You can be addicted to the internet. You can be addicted to anything you care to mention. And what it is, the crux of the matter is, whatever the issue is, are you controlling it, or is it controlling you? Now, clearly, whatever it is, obviously drink and drugs, but regardless of the underlying reasons or of why Scott Fitzgerald behaves like this, it clearly has him in its throes, and he can't get out of it. And he's been on, I think I read the article, one of the articles I read said he'd been on remand for 6 months, which is basically means he's been clean, probably mostly clean. I mean, drugs exist in prison. I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know. Anyone who knows anything about this, who isn't entirely naive, knows that drugs exist in prison. They go in and out of prisons, especially the Cat C prisons, and even the Cat B and the Cat A's that you can get them through. But in the Cat C prisons, weed, heroin, you can get, if you've got the money and if you're prepared to pay through the nose, you can get it. Spice is particularly rife at the moment, and has been for several years in prisons. The one nearest to me is just everyone's smoking spice in the nick. It's considered a nick drug. And there are actually, believe it or not, there are over 5,000 different types of spice. So you never know what you're taking. Some of it can give you a nice little float around the room. Others can make you absolutely psychotic. I know of one guy who's doing a 10 stretch. He's 3 or 4 years into it. He doesn't remember what happened. He smoked some spice and then walked up the high street attacking everyone, including a man who was wheeling his little baby in a pushchair. You end up with a 10 stretch. So drugs, you never know what you're taking. Heroin, perhaps 20-25% of it is opiates, the rest is garbage. Very often benzos or something else. But I don't know what Scott Fitzgerald has taken. It said in the report I read that it was cannabis and alcohol. Okay, fair enough. You mix that together, you're talking 2 depressants. So that's, you're not going to, it's like, if you consider that to be a cure, I mean, you might as well take poison for a stomach ache. Two depressants, alcohol and weed. They both bring you down. And what happened was Fitzgerald was in a pub. He was causing a scene for whatever reason, and probably because he didn't know what he was doing. He was off his proverbial tits. And he went outside. Someone followed him outside. I don't know what to do. What, I didn't read that bit. I didn't really say what the guy followed him out for, but Scott Fitzgerald used his fists as a weapon. And if you know, you probably know that if you are a boxer or involved in combat sports or a martial artist, your hands are considered lethal weapons under the law. And he broke the guy's jaw, and he got a GBH charge, which resulted in 46 weeks in prison. He can probably be out in about 30, 35 with time off for good behaviour. But he's now got a choice. Mr. Scott Fitzgerald has got a choice. He can either engage. Every prison has a recovery team. He can engage with them. He can get medication if he needs it. He can use it as a wake-up call. But the real test is going to be when he gets out of prison and he's got to survive in the outside world. And I've lost count of the amount of addicts who've said to me, my life is just out of control. I can't handle it out here. I just can't handle the pressures. I don't know how to function. I've got no social skills. I'm constantly in fear. I need to go back to prison to get my life together. That's what people say, because it's got structure, because you're fed 3 times a day, because you've got a roof over your head. You're in the relative warm. Maybe if you're lucky, you can, watch a bit of telly or whatever, So Fitzgerald is going to have to use it. He's got a choice. He ain't got that much time in prison. It's enough. And then when he gets out, that'll be the real test. And the organisation I work for I used to work for the criminal justice side of things. I did that for about 5.5 years, a little over 5.5 years. And I would go into prisons, I would assess people. And then the idea is when you come out of prison, you hit the ground running and you get the support you need to stay off the jungle, to stay off the booze or whatever. And when you're in prison, you can access some services to get you possibly a place to live when you get out, so you're not on the street. And it's not easy, it's not ideal. It's pretty basic. But if you're keen and you're motivated and you access the help and you park your pride and your ego at the door, because very often with addicts, they are running on emotion, raw emotion, and ego comes into it, and nothing is in control. Every emotion is out of control. Every emotion is controlling you. You are the proverbial cork in the sea, getting taken wherever the tide takes you. Why is Scott Fitzgerald facing this? What made him turn to drink and weed and everything? Was it a social thing that went wrong? Has he got some sort of underlying trauma in his past? I don't know. Child abuse, child neglect, sexual abuse, physical abuse from times gone by is very, very often the reason why people use drugs. It is a crude form of self-medication which almost never works. You have to access the people that know about these things. Once you start sticking needles in your arms, the game's up. It's very difficult to come back from that, but it can be done. And I mention that it can be done because I don't want this to be too doom-laden a video. And I want to use another example of a fighter, a boxer, who not so long ago, whose life was totally out of control, and that's Jason Too Smooth Booth, who won a whole slew of titles, British and Commonwealth titles. I think he was flyweight, British and Commonwealth flyweight champion. And he completely went off the rails with drugs, drink. I remember reading an interview with him. He said he was in the gutter and he would be looking for bottles to try and get the dregs out of them to drink them. It was that bad. And then when he made a comeback, he actually won the British and Commonwealth super bantamweight titles. And I think he challenged for a world title. I can't remember who it was against. I want to say Steve Molitor, but I could be wrong about that. I can't remember who it was. I'll have to look that up. And he also won, I think he won a Commonwealth title at bantamweight. So he was a 3-weight Commonwealth champ, a 2-weight British champ, and he challenged for a world title. And Jason Booth's probably in his 40s now. I would say he's probably in his early to mid 40s. But he turned his life around. You just want to talk about boxing saving people's lives. This is a prime example of it. It's fantastic. He turned his life around. Massive credit to him, of course. I don't know what he's doing now. I don't know whether he's still involved in boxing, but I remember that story as a perfect example of how you can change your life. If there is a way in, there is a way out. Some people have to crash land before they start climbing. And that can kill some people. Others, it can be a wake-up call. You're at the lowest ebb. You're living on the street. It's like kind of crashing and having every bone in your body broken. But you gradually mend, you repair, and then you get the help, and then you start putting your life together again. Jason Booth did that. It's now up to Scott Fitzgerald at 31 years of age to decide what's he going to do. And I think that I think it's certainly possible for him to do that, but he's got to want to do it. When you consider, I mean, 31, so let's say he does his time inside, that takes him up to 32. He has say a year getting himself physically fit again. That means he's 33. He'd probably have 2 or 3 years left to try and do something in boxing. He won't reach the heights that he could have reached if he'd stayed clean, but that's not really the point. The point is that boxing, as with Jason Booth and with many others, can still save him. But he's got to reach out for the help, and he's got to do the programs. It's like climbing a mountain. You never ever look at the top of the mountain, because if you do, you think, how the hell am I going to climb that? I can barely see the top. You don't look at the top. You climb a few feet in front of you. You sit down, have a rest if you need it. You climb another few feet, and so on. Over a long period of time, you get there. So all the best to not to Jason Booth, well, all the best to Jason Booth, certainly, but all the best to Scott Fitzgerald. He's gone inside. He's doing his time. I'm someone who believes in rehabilitation, but I believe it has to go hand in hand with retribution. Don't believe in letting people off. It's not an excuse just because you've got an addiction. This guy, Fitzgerald, he committed a violent act against someone. GBH, busted the guy's jaw. Guy's got a plate in his face now. You can't ignore that. He's got to do some time, but at the same time, is he going to use that time well? I hope he is. I hope he is. And good luck to the guy. I hope he recovers, because, you know, people can change, or most people can change. The ones that aren't flat-out psychopaths can change. So that's my spiel for today. Let me know if you've got any thoughts. Leave them below. Thanks for your time, as always, and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Please do. That helps us a lot. And hit the like button if you like the video as well, because that helps us too. We've got some boxing at the weekend, Taylor and Cameron, and also, of course, Loma versus Haney. So we've got plenty to look forward to. I'll do some preview. I've done some preview videos. I'll do some review videos. And, yeah, leave your comments below. Thanks a lot. Bye for now. And, of course, take care as always.